All right. So next up, I have Dr. Brent Nowak with us, and he is the founder and chief technology officer for a company called Orthoforge. Oh, there you go. We are seeing them now. Thanks so much. Go
Fantastic.
right ahead.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Again, I'm Brent Nowak. I'm the co-founder and Chief Technology Officer for Orthoforge. And what I'm going to present tonight is a unique technology on our ability to remotely and continuously monitor bone healing as they fracture. The problem is that since the 19th century, the standard of care significantly hasn't changed. I mean, we see a very sophisticated x ray machine on the left there, but as from the patient's experience, they still get exposed multiple times to harmful radiation. As a clinician, you have to schedule them to come in, and then you go conduct the physical exam and listen and understand their subjective reporting on pain and other kind of conditions. Now, if it's a child or there's an elderly patient, then you have the caregiver that also reports. In addition, what hasn't really changed is the clinician's experience. Now, you're not using films anymore, but the goal is to get the best outcomes possible. So the clinicians, the radiologists are interpreting x-rays across all these different multiple visits. Again, you listen to the patients and their caregivers, but ultimately the problem we're trying to solve is there's no quantitative assessment of how well the bone is healing, either absolutely or relatively within that patient. But what Orthoforge is proposing is an intelligent wearable that will provide the patient with remote monitoring. It reduces X-ray exposure, and you're going to get objective data in 4D. In other words, this can monitor nearly continuously in near real time, so you can get those trends. And based on our analysis and technologies, we're able to provide you a clear picture of how it is healing asymmetrically, which is typically hidden in some X-rays. So we've engaged industrial design firms and have shown how in this futuristic cast, the sensors are over the forearm, and we can use one, two, or multiple sensors as needed. These are very low cost devices that can be miniaturized. What happens is we're using ultrasound energy, and I want to emphasize that. It's not ultrasound imaging, but ultrasound energy. And that complex waveform you see there, it changes over time based on the patient. It changes depending on where the fracture is and in what bone, whether it's a distal fracture or a proximal fracture. So you end up getting very patient specific information. We take that information in our patented proprietary algorithms and we do some traditional signal processing and comparisons, but we've been spending the last 8 years in developing some deep learning algorithms that you see in that scatter plot there. Don't worry, you're not going to have to manage that kind of information. Rather, what we've done is we've created and prototyped some software that will provide you a display that could be on a smartphone, it could be on a tablet or your office computer, or you could have other office staff look at this data daily. Let me spend a quick minute here on the top. You see this white area up here where you could have everything from the patient's name, their gender, when the fracture occurred, what type of fracture, etc. What we've proposed and down here in the black background first is a growth chart. This is similar to a growth chart that you might have for your children where you look at the height and the weight. In this case, this chart would represent the healing progress across the 4 stages, the initial hematoma all the way through bone consolidation. This chart also, while it represents percentiles, it would change depending on whether you're looking at a young adolescent or an octogenarian. In the lower right-hand corner is a cross section, which is very unique to our technology, where we're looking, you've got your intramedullary canal here. We've quadrant off the cross section from the anterior, posterior to medial lateral. And on the left are the four quadrants where we're showing healing across those 4 stages. So if this were animated, which we can do and show you, but this coloration would change depending on how well you're healing over time and would identify where you're getting some asymmetric healing. So we've demonstrated this technology and we bucketed them in 3 different preclinical trials. It's either benchtop bone simulations or we've done in vitro and in vivo studies. One of the most recent studies was with 2 sheep out of the Surgical and Orthopedic Research Lab out of New South Wales, out of Sydney, Australia. What they did there, we did a bicortical surgical osteotomy in the right rear femur, and we stabilize it with an intramedullary nail. Now, all of our data is baselined against X-rays and CT scans. And the reason I highlighted the intramedullary nail is it doesn't matter how you fixate the bone. It could be plates and screws, it could be an external halo, or it could be, like we show there, an intramedullary nail. Now, this sensor sits on the skin, which again is very unique to our patent. Other technologies today are looking to do implantables, but we're doing it quite differently. Now, everyone wants to understand really how well we're doing. And when you start talking about machine learning, the summary score is called the F1 score, which ranges from 0 to 1, and it has to deal with precision and recall. And what that looks at is how many true positives, true negatives, false positives, and false negatives. And what you can see here, what I want to demonstrate is some of our most recent research and demonstration is showing that as we driven it over time, our F1 score is now settling about 0.98, but our error bars are getting very, very small. And when we're using convolutional neural networks and convolutional neural networks, we're very excited by that. So where are we in our technology development? Well, the blue boxes you see here in our timeline are the technology, which could be hardware or software. These are the yellow boxes are the clinical trials that we've been pursuing, preclinical trials we've been conducting, and then the funding along the bottom. Early on, we raised $350,000, which we're very proud of. We've been very capital efficient with that funding, and we've been able to do a fracture gap analysis that was requested by Johnson & Johnson Trauma, where we're able to identify fractures less than a millimeter gap and identify the location, the geometry with those same kind of F1 scores. We've leveraged economic development funds from the state of Michigan, which are non-dilutive funds, to continue automating some of the assessment systems and doing additional bone composite healing. We raised another $300,000 to continue to develop the software, and where we've engaged also our industrial design firm called KCAD. Now, significantly last year, I'm going to spend a quick 30 seconds on this. We submitted a proposal through MTech, which is a Medical Technology Enterprise Consortium, which is a different contract vehicle with the DoD, multi-million-dollar proposal. This problem we're having in quantifying bone healing is one the military is dealing with readiness and availability of their soldiers. So we have been bucketed in the highest DoD rating. So we're hopefully going to receive that funding in 2022. We're already in conversations with Henry Ford Health System to conduct a pilot human study at a Trauma One orthopedic trauma center. And then with that, we're going to do additional raise to pursue our FDA work, and we're in conversations today with organizations like you see on the right, DePuy Synthes, NuVasive, and Bioventus. Now, just as good as the technology is and what we're providing is really the team we have. We have everybody here on the left. The board of directors have all been part of medical device companies, had successful exits. Our science advisory board is filled with giants from Cleveland Clinic, University of Penn, as well as MIT, where we've got world-class ultrasound technology experts. I want to thank you for the time and take a few moments to answer your questions now.
Brent, thank you so much. This is, again, really exciting technology. I mean, I think about my pediatric patients and the number of times that they have to go back in for a repeat x-ray and an exam. And I could see, well, for young and old alike, how this could be very beneficial. So one question I have, like, do you think this technology is eventually going to replace the use of x-rays and radiologists, et cetera, in the evaluation of bone healing?
Oh, absolutely not. This is an adjunct technology to give you more information so that you can do the diagnosis and determine if you need to change the standard of care. And one good point you raised when you mentioned the pediatrics, Katie, is that this is a passive technology with respect to the patients. So you're going to get 100% patient compliance because it automatically takes those readings daily and multiple ones so that the patient doesn't even know what's going on.
That's incredible. Another question I have, because you mentioned briefly that this technology will likely be able to use to monitor and evaluate soft tissue injuries. I'm guessing there are other potential indications as well. Can you talk a little bit more about those?
Yeah, sure. In fact, let me see if I can advance the slide here. I think I might have one that can show you. So what's unique about our technology, again, it sits on the skin. And what a lot of researchers and technology developers in the past have struggled with is how do you deal with the different body types, the body mass index, how much muscle, how much tissue.
Sure.
In our technology, we've been able to solve that problem. And that's actually in our pad, which we're the only ones that are able to do that today. So yes, we can observe soft tissues and the changes today. Now, we haven't focused our development in that area. Our target is the long bone healing initially, but we've already got very good indications that we're going to be able to look at other soft tissues that are in the body and monitor their healing and injury as well.
So one of the questions that's in the Q&A is this idea, they talked about the clavicle and or something, in the shoulder. You think about, okay, so, the forearm with that circumferential technology seems to make a lot of sense. How would you do it in an area like that?
That's a great idea. So we're actually looking at another technology with our some of our science advisory board members. Mark Schaefer, he's got over 25 years in ultrasound technologies, PhD from MIT, 25 patents, et cetera. We're looking at flexible sensing technologies now, where there'll be multiple sensors in each one of those. So this patch then can be put over the complex geometry of different joints in the bone, in the body.
Very cool. Oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
lots and lots of questions in Q&A. So quickly, I'm going to go over a few more, okay?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Any crossover with therapeutic ultrasound for bone fracture healing of non-unions like exogen?
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, so actually early on we considered that and looking as teaming up with some of these companies, and that's why you'll see that I think the Exogen technology is owned by Nuvasive. I'm not sure, but we're actually having conversations along that line. That is a great strategic partnership we're considering.
Fantastic.
Hmm.
And another question around, will this monitor a spinal fusion as well? With, again, the way that you discussed, maybe future iterations of the technology.
Hmm. We actually had conversations with a couple of spinal companies that do implants for that kind of thing. And while we haven't done a study yet, and because right now we used initially off-the-shelf industrial ultrasound sensors, we don't see any reason why we couldn't, but that would have to be a separate targeted development for our technology.
And there was one question on here, again, and I think it's hard to tell from your prototype to, again, kind of the second generation. They're asking about, okay, so casted fractures, where does this go, and how does it work?
Oh, okay. So the fundamentally it doesn't change how it works at all. I mean, the idea that in a casted fracture you would put it as underneath a wearable. Let me see if I can go back to that slide real quick and make this a quick answer. Isn't that great? All this automation. Okay, so this is showing that this is sitting on the skin. These our engineering studies have shown that these batteries can last up to 3 months. So these would be single-use disposables. So if it's a cast in the cast, as you know, ultrasound needs a coupling agent, and we've already investigated it, and have identified materials that will provide that skin interface that's necessary for the ultrasound to transmit on there. So if it was in a cast, it would just be cast under there. And in our earlier sketch, we had a sort of a wristband idea. So this is where some of that funding will come in our multi-million-dollar funding to do our pilot study. And then when we hire the engineering firms to do the castable ones, we'll include that in the development as well.
Fantastic. Well, Brent, I know there's a couple more questions out
Good.
there, and I'm hoping that our audience will stay to come ask those questions in the networking.
Mm-hmm.
But this is very exciting. We're excited that you were here today to tell us all about it, and I can't wait to hear about your future in human studies and more of the data. So very cool.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I want to thank all of those. I see there's several people from overseas for staying up late and joining us today. It's great to see you here.